Morning, students. In relation to yesterday's class, we were dealing with the first unit. We have seen the fall of Constantinople yesterday. Today, we will just try to see an understanding of the important scientific developments, inventions, and geographical discoveries. The period from 14th to 17th centuries has been a period of ideas and inventions. Ideas connected to economy, ideas connected to statesmanship, ideas connected to state. So a completely new set of political ideas were emerging. And similarly, this period in the field of science and technology, also there was long strides that were made during this particular period. So we will just try to understand and analyze what is the nature of this particular period. So I will try to first show you some important slides which are connected to this particular period directly. And after showing you the slides, I will just try to discuss in detail what has been the impact of this ideas and inventions and discoveries on this particular period, say from 14 to 17th centuries. In fact, it starts with 1453 when Constantinople was overrun by the Ottoman Empire. This is basically because of the fact that Constantinople was a connecting link and a most important link for trade with Asia Minor and Africa and other parts of the world. So when Constantinople went into the control of the Ottoman Empire, Europe was compelled to find out alternate routes for the trade purpose with mainly Asia and Africa. So as it is said, necessity is the mother of invention. The European necessity and the compelling conditions to promote their trade and look for fresh areas had effected in bringing about a lot of geographical discoveries in this particular period. Similarly, when this period, it was trying to break away from feudalism and bring in capitalism with an increase in the volume of trade and identifying new areas. There was a change in the economic conditions, which also had an impact on the social conditions. So this will be the area of our understanding for today. We will first try to see what were some of the scientific inventions. And in the second phase, we will try to see what were the important geographical discoveries. And in the third phase, we will try to see what was the impact of these two scientific inventions and geographical discoveries on Europe and to some extent on Asia and Africa. So the next slide that I'm going to show you is the invention of submarine. This was a very important development in the marine warfare. Marine, I mean here on the warfare on the seas. So you can find that they had invented a ship which could travel under the water. So this is one important invention in this particular period. And the next slide I'm showing you is a mechanical clock. Time became an important factor, and the 24 hours in a day it became very necessary and essential to monitor and identify the time factor. So this necessity made man to invent the first clock. You can see it's basically a mechanical clock with so many positions which indicate the time factor in a period of 24 hours. And then this had a lot of impact. You have the invention of the printing press, and the invention of printing press here by John Gutenberg had a lot of impact on the development of regional vernacular. And not only the development of regional vernacular, the transmitting of ideas, whether they were political ideas, social ideas, or whether it was literature, whether it was poetry, it was a very important development, the printing press, which contributed to the needs of the times in terms of education and information. So the printing press had a lot of impact on the between the periods of 14th and 17th centuries. The next slide that I'm showing you is that of an eyeglass, which helped man. You can see the intensity and the attention with which the man is trying to read even in the old age. This eyeglass was also an important invention in this particular period, that is between 14 to 16. This is also another eyeglass which I'm showing you. When you move on to the warfare or the war areas, you have artillery and gunpowder being invented. And the invention of artillery and gunpowder changed the basic nature of war. And it also contributed for the imperialist ideas, where people started using greater amount of artillery and gunpowder for their expansionist policies. So you can see that in every aspect, whether it was from spectacles, whether it was from printing press, whether it was a change in the war tactics, where previously it was man is to man, sword is to sword. Now you have artillery, you have gunpowder. So the basic nature of war is changing, the basic nature of society is changing, the basic nature of economic relations are changing. So that is the reason I tried to tell you that this was a period of ideas and inventions. And these ideas and inventions changed the basic lifestyle of people, the living conditions of the people, the mode of production of people, and the surplus of production. So everything was getting affected. Like, for example, you can say very clearly that this was the period when Europe moved from feudalism to capitalism. And so you can see that, and when there's a change in the economic conditions, that is, as it is said very well, that there will be a change in the social conditions. So overall, when you look at it, you find that the application of science and technology, which went on a long way in this particular period, had affected every perception, every dimension of man's life, right from economy or economic conditions to the kind of war tactics that you have developed in this particular period. Everything underwent a change. And here you can see the matchbox, which had a beginning in this particular period. And this is also a very important invention of this particular period. And another most important, what should I say, instrument which was developed in this particular period was the marine's compass. This marine's compass, in fact, previously, before the invention of this marine's compass, the voyagers who set on the seas were not able to identify the direction in which they were traveling after getting into the sea. So it became very difficult to identify in which direction they were traveling and where they were going. So the invention of marine's compass was a very major development, which had, what should I say, which gave impetus to the voyages and the travelers on the sea. So you just look at the kind of inventions that have come up in this particular period. It very clearly indicates that there is a lot of development in mathematics, in field of physics, and even in the field of chemistry. So there was a lot of research going on, a lot of inventions were being made, and most of these inventions were being made on the basis of observation and understanding. And this is one important salient feature of the scientific inventions of this particular period. Nothing changed overnight. It took time, and it took a lot of persistence on the part of the people to observe, understand, and come to an conclusion, and then invent a scientific equipment. And here you can see the first time a compound and a microscopic lenses that were being used. These microscopic lenses were very much useful in the study of human life, in the study of botany, and it contributed to the development of medical sciences to a very great extent. So you have there a compound microscope, a single lens, and a multiple objective lenses. So all these inventions, see, it is not just that they found or invented something all of a sudden. There was a lot of observation, there was a lot of physics in it, there was a lot of mathematics in it, and all this contributed to bringing about a change in the living conditions and the understanding of nature, the understanding of what should I say, state, etc. So the scientific development contributed a lot for man to become adventurous. Okay, when he was trying to set on the sea, or when he was affected by a disease, or when it was necessary for some kind of an improvement in the agricultural sector, science was coming to his rescue in this particular period between the 14th and the 17th centuries. So, and that is the reason we call this as a period of intellectual quickening. Man started thinking very quickly, very fastly. And when you look at it from the other perspective also, you can say that the Renaissance spirit, because this was a period where you have a movement, popular movement called the Renaissance movement. And the Renaissance movement contributed to the development of the scientific temperament in man, where man was trying to understand his relation with nature. So all this kind of developments, all this kind of ideas had pushed the thinking dynamics of man to the forefront, and you have drastic changes coming up in Europe, and all the changes that had come up in Europe slowly over a period of time started percolating to Asia and Africa also. So here, this man is a very important man, Leonardo da Vinci. You can see some of the designs that he made with connection to pulleys, etc. So this man was one of the pioneers of some of the inventions in this particular period. And now we can just try to see, we have now observed some of the scientific inventions which have brought about or affected the man's living conditions between the 14th and the 17th century. Now we will just try to see some of the geographical discoveries which had a lot of impact on the history of this particular period. I'm just showing you a map of Ptolemy's in the 2nd century, and in the 5th century, reconstruction by the same map was reconstructed by Nicholas Germus. Okay, so you can find some of the European travelers on the right side and on the left side of the map. And these were the people who were trying to travel from one continent to another continent, from one place to another place, where at times it was an adventure, and at times it was a necessity of promoting trade and commerce, etc. All said and done, this period had been a very important period in terms of geographical discoveries. You had Asia, Africa, and Europe, the old continents. And this was a period when you have these continents coming in contact with the Americas and Australia. So that way, new areas, new lands were discovered, and there was a migration of people. These lands were brought under cultivation, and you have nations coming up there. So all this happened during this particular period. So the geographical discoveries of this particular period, that is from 14th century to 17th century, had a very telling impact on the history of this particular period. The next slide I'm showing you is John Werdling. You can just see the kind of an adventurous spirit in him, where he's trying to get onto the sea with his team and go on for a voyage. Here are some of the important routes, or what we call Silk Road or the Silk Route. Here, when I say the Silk Route, I mean the spice trade routes. And these were the routes which were blocked by the Ottoman Empire after the downfall of Constantinople. So after the downfall of Constantinople, for Europe, it became a necessity. Previously, it was they were using the land routes, and now it became a necessity for Europe to get in touch with Africa and Asia, especially countries like India, China, Java, Sumatra, Japan, etc. So they had to look for alternative routes. So this route, which was there, they have found out on the route on the seas. From Mediterranean Sea, they had come down and they had entered, touched the shores of Arabia, Somalia, Africa, and then entered Indian Ocean, and then finally made it to India, and then also to China and Java. So these are some of the important routes that you can see, which had developed after 1453, after the fall of Constantinople. And this is a map which is showing the main travelers of the age of discovery. If you just see that yellow, it is Spain's position. And if you see the orange, it was Portugal's possession. And if you see that red arrow, it was a route that was taken by Columbus. And another arrow, which is in a different color, it was taken by Gabo. And again, you have Gabo's route in 2-3 directions. And then the black one is that of Cartier. And then the light blue is that of Da Gama. The thick blue is of Malgan, and the circular parts are of that of Balboa. So these are some of the, you just see the importance of and the necessity, why so many areas, why monarchs and why companies were sponsoring these voyages to identify fresh markets for the promotion of the trade. As I was just telling you, I'll just show you the earlier side. So you have Europe and these Egypt, Somalia, Africa. These are the areas where you had a lot of resources. And India was also a very important resource and a finished product marketable area. Similarly, China was also important in terms of resources and finished product marketable area. So all these people were at times sponsored by the rulers, and at times were sponsored by the companies to get onto the sea and looking for fresh islands. So this is an important development in this particular period. Here I have given you some of the major discoveries and destination and the name of the main explorer, the year in which it was explored, and who funded it. So if you take the Congo River, the main explorer was Diego Coa, and it was sponsored by John II of Portugal. Similarly, Cape of Good Hope, Indian Ocean was by Diaz in the year 1488. Again, it is John II of Portugal. West Indies was done by Columbus in 1492. and it was sponsored by Ferdinand and Isabella. India was discovered by Vasco da Gama in 1498, and it was sponsored by and funded by Manuel I. Brazil was explored by Cabral in the year 1500, and it was sponsored and funded by Manuel I. The Spice Islands, that is Western Australasia and Western Pacific regions, these were explored by Albuquerque, Ebero, and Sereria, and it was sponsored by again Manuel I. So Pacific Ocean was again main explorer was Vasco Balboa and Ferdinand. It was sponsored in the year 1513, and it was sponsored by Ferdinand II of Aragon. So you can just see New Zealand again was Australia was Philippines and Magellan and Pacific Ocean, Antarctica, Hawaii, all these regions. These are all the major discoveries of this particular period. You can see the names of the main explorers. You can see the years, and you can see who had funded this particular period. So the next slide that I'm going to show you is a kind of a caravel ship which was introduced in the 15th century for oceanic exploration, to go on to the ocean and go on for a voyage for a longer period of time. The picture is very interesting. You can see the sailors, you can see some of the traders, and you can see the country's flag also. And this is an interesting photograph. And here you have the replicas, some of the replicas of the photos of Pinta, Nena, Santa Maria, De Flotas, etc. in Spain. Okay, so you can see the ships, the way they are parked, and the way they were designed, shaped, and the way they were set on the seas. Okay, here again you have another caravel, Latin sail rings and head sail, and this was the kind of ship which was used by the Portuguese, and the maneuverability of this was very essential, and this belonged to the age of discovery, that is the 14th and the 17th century. Here I'm showing you a photo which is showing the base of a ship. You can see the shaft which is useful in maneuvering, and this was very useful in giving a direction, a required direction for the ship on the sea. And here I am showing you the route of Marco Polo travels. Very important, and you can just see how he has traveled in two different phases, one in 1271 and the other one in 1295. Okay, so see, these are all some of the, you just see that they did not stop at any particular point. They went on traveling in search of new places, and all these geographical discoveries had contributed to the growth of trade and commerce in this particular period. Here again, you have the Portuguese discoveries between 1415 and 1543. In green, it is in the reign of Dijallo III. Okay, just look at the slide. You can see the different areas, and you can see the Porto, Brazil in 1500, and all the areas which are shaded in some color or the other, all the areas which were discovered in this particular period, and they turn out to be important discoveries of this particular period. The next slide that I'm showing you is that of the 4 voyages of Christopher Columbus between the years 1492 and 1503. And the 4 voyages, you have 4 different colors that have been used, and you can see almost from Cuba and to Africa, and from South America down to Lisbon. He was able to travel in those days, and the first, second, and third, and the fourth voyages, 4 different colors have been used, and this proves the kind of adventurous people that the Europeans were. And when they set on the seas, it also indicates the need for exploring fresh areas of market. And then here I'm showing you a route of Vasco da Gama, and this was between 1497 to 1499, and he traveled to India. You have two different colors being used again to indicate the two different areas or the two different routes that he had taken to reach down to India, that is Goa and Calicut. And the next map that I'm showing you is that of Magellan's voyage around the world. And this was done between 1519 to 1522. And this is an important route that was developed by Magellan in this particular period, between 1519 to 1522. Here you have a photo of Christopher Columbus, an important discoverer of this particular period. And this is Ferdinand Magellan, another important person who belongs to this particular period. And in the next slide, we have Vasco da Gama's route to India from Portugal. So these are some of the slides that I have for you, which give you an idea of the importance of geographical discoveries in this particular period. And I have also given you some examples of the scientific discoveries and developments in this particular period. So now we will have to analyze what was the impact of these discoveries in this period. Both the science and the scientific and the geographical discoveries, when you're looking at it from the political and economic point of view, for countries like Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and other some of the countries in Europe, they developed the idea of colonization. And this idea of colonization becomes the basis on which, at a later period, you have the development of the ideas of imperialism and colonialism. So one of the first most important outcome of this particular period is that they were able to, these scientific inventions were able to influence the politico-economic, or I would say the geopolitical and economic needs of the various countries in Europe in this particular period. So this is one, you have colonization, and based on colonization, which was a need in this particular period, you have the promotion of trade, you have the promotion of commerce, you have the economically changing, you're breaking away from feudalism to capitalism, and you are beginning, it's the beginning of a colonialism on which you have the development of imperialism. See, all new ideas, fresh ideas coming up in this particular period as a result of the geographical discoveries and the scientific inventions. I would like to bring to your attention that America was colonized in this particular period, and Mexican islands were colonized in this particular period, and you have wars coming up because of this. And as I had shown you, there was a lot of artillery and gunpowder that was used in these wars. And you have what you call the Columbian Exchange also coming up in this particular period. And the Columbian Exchange was basically in terms of humans, exchange of humans. And this was an important development. The reason is because in the Atlantic, you have the development of the slave trade. If you take by 1700, when the French Revolution breaks out in 1789, you have a major percentage of the French population as slaves. Okay, human beings own human beings. institutions owned human beings, and the monarchy had slavery as a practice. Okay, so this kind of discovery of new islands had some kind of an evil or a negative social impact also in terms of the development of the idea of slavery in this particular period. Okay, and then as I was telling you earlier, you have the exploration of Africa and Australia and the Pacific Ocean. These two regions were explored in this particular period. And when the exploration of these regions, you have old three continents, most important three continents, where you have the beginnings of the story of civilization, that is Asia, Africa, and Europe. These were the regions where you have the original civilization. I mean, you have the beginnings, the origins of the civilizations coming up. And these continents are coming up in contact with both the Americas and North America, South America, and Australia also. This was a major development. This was a major development, and the natives of these regions were being changed. So there was some kind of a cultural erosion, and the people who went with their culture had affected the native culture of these regions. There was some kind of negative impact on that ground also. And so this was something which was, I mean, when you look at it from the social perspective, it also like slave trade and cultural erosion. These were some of the negative aspects that you can see very clearly of the geographical discoveries and the scientific inventions of this particular period. But on the whole, we can say that the scientific inventions had advanced the material life of the people. And the geographical discoveries brought fresh areas which were not under cultivation or which did not contribute to the economic growth. They were brought under control and cultivation. So there was a kind of a economic growth. So there was some kind of a majority opinion, we can say that there is a kind of development, but under this development, there was some kind of social negative aspects also. So whenever there's some kind of, it's a usual thing, whenever there's some kind of development or whenever there's some kind of an invention, it will have both a positive impact and a negative impact. So the scientific inventions and the geographical discoveries also had some kind of a positive and negative impact on the contemporary period, that is from 14th century to 17th century. And these discoveries, in some areas, there is recorded information that it becomes a cause for spread of pandemic and diseases, and some of the diseases that were there in cross-continental connections, they had spread. So this was also another negative impact. And finally, when we just try to look at it, these geographical discoveries, we can say, contributed a lot to the development or to the spread of Christianity across the world. Christianity had become, by the 18th and 19th centuries, it had become almost a global religion. So these scientific inventions, we can say, and geographical discoveries, they had a lot of impact on the mode of production, on the social conditions, on the political concepts, and on the cultural concepts. And finally, we can say that it also contributed a lot for the spread of Christianity during this particular period. And you have missionary activities coming up across the world. So we will continue from this particular period in the next class, where we will try to understand what was the difference between Renaissance and Reformation and how they had influenced the society and economy and political conditions from 16th century onwards. Thank you.